Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of City of Lacombe Council for Monday, January 23rd. It is 5:29 p.m. and I will call the meeting to order. Everyone's had an opportunity to review the agendas. With respect to the consent agenda, are there any items there that you would like to see removed? If not, we'll need a motion. Councillor Dallas.
Motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Anyone else? All those in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. And for the regular agenda, CEO Gowdy.
For council's consideration, I propose to add one item, in-camera legal item, to the agenda for this evening.
We could list that as an item 8.2 then under legal. Councillor Dallas.
Motion to accept the agenda as amended.
Thank you. One last chance for anybody. I think we've got regular agenda up on our voting devices, so you can go ahead and vote now, please. In the interest of time, I will call for a hand on the motion for the regular agenda. All those in favor? That is unanimous as well. Thank you. So let's move down to item 6.1, the downtown parking improvements. We've got our engineering tech here, Philip Evans. Whenever you've got your notes and whatnot together, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council. I can count on one hand how many times I've been in front of you, and I'm again grateful to be here, and hopefully we can keep pushing this number up. Over the summer, there was a request made by a business owner downtown to investigate the parking layouts behind their business. It was then my opportunity to go and do a site analysis, to take some measurements and to come up with a suggestion as to an optimized or an improved parking layout. That was something that we looked at doing for 2 locations downtown. The first of which is at 5026 49th Street. And at this location, it's currently a public parking lot. There are a number of considerations when looking at this spot and the possible reconfiguration options. For each location, we came up with 2 potential layout changes. The first option at 5026 remains in a 90-degree parking stall format. That's the way that it is currently. We do suggest, repainting the lines to conform a bit more closely to the minimum widths of stalls found in the land use bylaw. If we were to pursue that, and it is our recommendation to pursue option 1 at 5026, you would see an increase of 8 stalls formally painted. But it is also important to note that while I was there taking photos and measurements, some vehicles were using, for example, the side of the building of the blacksmith shop as parallel parking, and some were parking immediately adjacent to the lane to the west of this parking lot. So that number 8 is maybe a little misleading, but essentially would be 8 additional stalls painted with up to 5 that were being used already in that state. So a net total of 3. So for the second option at this location, we looked at doing a angled parking configuration based on the measurements in our land use bylaw. It could work. It would give us a surplus of 4 stalls. So again, 1 or maybe 0 net if you're looking at how many vehicles are using the layout haphazardly currently. And some of the other considerations with the 45-degree angle layout would be that one-way travel lanes would have to be implemented, meaning that vehicles would enter from 49th Street and exit through the lane to the west. Now, for both of these options, we would have to consider the neighbors to the north. There's a property owner, a landowner to the north. In our research, we couldn't find an official joint use agreement for the stalls accessed from the north of the parking lot. If we were to go with our recommendation of option number 1, which is that 90-degree parking stall configuration, we recommend that the administration enter into an official or a formalized joint access agreement with that property owner. And then as well as option 2, 2 more considerations would include working with the blacksmith shop, with the Historical Society. They do store some material along that north side of their building. And they have expressed a willingness to work with city council or with administration, if that was the preferred option. And the other consideration, let me just refresh myself, is obtaining a development permit to legitimize the actual use of that space as a parking lot. Apparently, it was some kind of grandfathering in as far as its land use currently. And so to try to be clear here, those 2 considerations would apply to option 1 and option 2 at 5026. The only difference in considerations would be option 2 would not require a joint use agreement with the property owner to the north. And then after some of our deliberations about this one location, we saw the opportunity to look at one more location for parking optimization along 49B Avenue. And essentially, in response to a request for information, there was a response that stated that there wasn't quite enough space in the width of the roadway to provide parking, angled parking on both sides of that road. But we are able to gain a net of 17 stalls if we flip the sides of angle parking. So the angle parking would be moving from the north or east side to the west or south side of 49B Ave, at least up until about where Lido's starts after that lane to the south. And then we would introduce parallel parking there. After that, we essentially are looking to council to endorse us moving forward with consultation efforts with businesses and residents who are adjacent or directly impacted by these changes or potential changes. And if that is all, I am open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Councillor Konik.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. No questions really. I just, other than to say, I like the option. I think it's 1 for both of them. Actually, the first one doesn't really matter so much, but I definitely like option 1 for 49B. I'm not too much of a fan of the whole one-way idea. I think that's a street that's utilized by a great many people. So I think the one-way probably wouldn't work very well there. But other than that, I think it's terrific. Whatever we can do to utilize more parking, it's always a need for more parking. The only other thing I would recommend doing, and maybe I'll talk to Director Lapointe tomorrow, is that we have a DARP meeting tomorrow night. So maybe I could run this by them as well tomorrow, print off some hard copies and see what their take is on it. I suspect they'll be on board, but I will do that tomorrow as well. Thank you.
Counselor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So yeah, a few things on regards to the parking lot. I also like one the best if that's a possibility, because of course that requires a deal, I guess, with the neighboring landowner. Will there be like parking curbs installed as well? Is that part of the project, or is it just painted lines?
Now, option one at that location is just repainting the lines.
Okay.
The curb wouldn't be impacted unless you were to go with option two to give access to one-way traffic.
Sorry, maybe I'm using the wrong terminology. I mean like actual like little concrete blocks that you put in place that you park up again.
Like wheel stop or like a
Wheel stop there,
chop-
that's the word we're looking for
right.
then. Would those be a consideration for that?
They're a consideration for the 45-degree angle option for sure. It was because of the way that the layout was stacked on top of each other. It was something that we wanted to look at to make sure that a vehicle wasn't bumping into the front panel of another. For the 90-degree, it wasn't an essential part of that, but it would be, I think we estimated $100 per stall.
Okay.
So you would add the, is it 23 at least for the 90-degree section?
Just, I realize that maybe isn't as convenient for snow clearing, but it is, I think it helps delineate, especially in the winter, and we are a winter city, where it is that you're actually meant to be parking. I know I quite often use that for landmarking, and I drive a truck, so it just makes things a lot more convenient. And then the other, with the other project, the other street, I do also like option one. I believe this was brought up to us at Coffee with Council not that long ago about increasing the parking on that street, and I think it's a very good idea. We want a vibrant downtown. Obviously, part of that means that people need to be able to park. The realistic expectation isn't necessarily they're going to be able to park right in front of where you're going, but there just does need to be parking available. My only concern with that area isn't actually specifically to do with parking spaces. It's more to do with that. So the laneway that exits onto the diagonal street there. So the one that would be, say, by the Masonic Hall, and then also the one that is behind Lido's. Those are fairly heavily trafficked because there is a lot of parking behind that area, as well as public parking next to the BMO. And now I don't typically drive to work, but I do sometimes. And it seems inordinately that I will run into where I can't get through the alley. And I've actually had it where I couldn't get through that exit. I couldn't get through the north exit. And then now I have to actually physically turn around and go out another exit. And it seems that it happens, in my opinion, too often. And part of the problem is that on that north one that's feeding onto the street that we're talking about, you have a large amount of like a dumpster and that sort of pushed. So, where the curb has been cut so that you can like get onto the road. I find quite often I'm forced over where I'm actually going over the curb to get out if I want to get out of there. And I'm just wondering if that could be kind of looked at when this whole area is being kind of considered, because I do find that to be a reoccurring problem just with that dumpster and et cetera there. And just the way that the property juts out. I think it's the Masonic Hall that's right there. Like their parcel's actually quite a bit out into the, I don't know. It's not immediately obvious when you drive through there that it's private property. And so I just, yeah. Anyways, I'm just bringing that to your attention because I find that to be problematic. And yeah, it's just something that people might not have noticed. I do, because it's something that's a normal part of my life.
Counselor Hickstrom.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So just to bring up, I really appreciate what you've been doing here and just how tidy it can become, because I walk by that parking lot with some regularity and I agree with you, there's sort of people using spots that aren't delineated. I'm just sharing a comment from a citizen that is it possible to have one of the lots in the parking lot behind the 49th Street public parking lot, one of those lots saved for bike parking. And I'm one of those people that has now, I've graduated into having an e-bike, and we bike all over Central Alberta, and we often don't have anywhere where we can put our bikes. So I thought that was an excellent consideration. I don't know if that's something that falls under you or DARP. I appreciate what Councillor Connick said. And this really has nothing to do with any of it, but as we're working with our downtown, another citizen mentioned that there's just not enough garbage cans. So I don't know if there's a garbage can that should go in the parking lot, because as people get in and out of their cars, they invariably have cups, but that also can be a DARP consideration. But thank you for this. I agree. Let's not go with a one-way street on 49B. Let's just have the angle parking on the one side.
Thank you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just a quick question. I also like option one for both of these. Our total cost on this, what are we looking at?
For the line paint and actually was just line paint, it's $5,800 was our estimate. I think we also have to do some blackout for the current lines, and so there's paint to do that as well as the paint for the new layout.
So there's no additional cost as far as anything else other than maybe some of the little curb stops, if you put those in, which would probably double that cost at least, right?
I think it wouldn't be quite doubling because the 58 is included for both sites. I don't remember the exact linear meter that we're looking at to paint. The cost does not include curb stops. That would be
Okay.
an additional cost to our estimate.
So, and you would have two of those per parkings, like, well, there'd be one for each stall then, curb stops, so,
Yeah, ideally.
all right. I guess that's all my questions were. There was no other costs involved with that at all. It was a joint agreement that there was no other cost to the city other than potential repaving at a later date.
Right. That's a good point, Councillor Gullickson. Yes, so in the joint use agreement, we believe, or administration thinks that it would be important to include a clause that makes the agreement amenable to all parties, including the individual who owns the property to the north. And so one of those examples of a clause where repaving would be a shared cost between that property owner and the city, whenever it's required.
And currently the parking lot, the majority of the parking in there, is that staff downtown?
I'm not 100% sure on the usage. I would assume that it's people using the facilities or the businesses downtown. I believe that there's also businesses that are in the property to the north. I really don't know with any real certainty who uses it, but we can assume that it's patrons
Kinda
or
joint.
employees. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dallas.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. In regards to 49B Avenue, I like Avenue 1, and thank you to administration and all involved with this as it was brought to us. And I think the people on that street will be pleased to see that it's moving forward. With these parking spaces, is there accessibility parking or parking for people with disabilities included in that, or are these just standard parking spaces?
These are based on the minimum requirements in the land use bylaw. That's a good question. I'm not aware if those minimums are directly related to accessibility standards. Perhaps Director Thompson knows.
And Mr. Bevins is correct there that the layouts we've provided are based on the minimum normal parking stalls. I think that if there's a desire from council to include that question in the consultation with neighboring businesses, we could ask if there would be support for the inclusion of some accessible parking stalls in this parking lot. And the trade-off would be we might lose a parking. There may be have to lose a parking stall or two in the process, but certainly we can get some feedback from the business community and those around this parking lot on that.
Great.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I personally would appreciate if we could involve that in the consultation, as I know one of the businesses there is in the business of providing healthcare, and that was one of the topics that they brought up to us. And that's all I have on that. Thank you.
And CO Gowdy.
So one of the things that is included in the memo is that a development permit would be required to do this upgrade in the parking lot itself. At that point, it would go through a permit process where they would consider potential conditions like the inclusion of a accessible parking spot. On the road, we do have a process that we've used before for consideration when we get requests from nearby businesses. And if that comes up during consultation, I think we could deploy the same process for the street side parking if there's a need for accessible parking.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure how practical it is to have accessible parking in that alley, but something that we could certainly look at in the future for sure. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I did nearly miss a note that I had here. Actually, in regards to bicycles as well, like Councillor Hoekstra. I do think that, you know, we're talking about adding parking stalls downtown, and I fully support that. I think that that's a need that this community would respond positively to. Another need, though, I think that we should be talking about when discussing downtown is increasing things like bicycle parking. I honestly think that every time we're talking about improving infrastructure as far as parking vehicles, we should also be thinking about so bicycles as well as pedestrian traffic for that matter. I'm not seeing anything here specifically pedestrian wise that's related, but I do think that while we're, you know, looking at these specific areas that we should be looking at, you know, simple things like bike racks. I see it all the time downtown where people are trying to make do with I know I had an appointment recently. I had to find a light post that was on the opposite side of the parking lot to tie my bike to so that I could go to my appointment. Like it just seems crazy. So I think that that's a consideration as well, whether we need to consult with property owners or whatever the case may be. But I really think that that should be a consideration when we're talking about downtown, you know, getting people downtown. This is essentially what we're trying to do. We're trying to accommodate people downtown. So we have to be careful not to be so car centric and think about other modes of travel as well.
Philip, the one item that was not considered here, the stall on with respect to the 49th Street options, stall number 1 was a problem for the existing owner to the north. So in order to expect cooperation from that individual, I suggest that stall number 1 be omitted in either case, perhaps be delineated with something, flower pot or a barricade or whatever the case may be, because that's not going to be, that's going to be a troublesome point. And I was curious, on page 3, was the parallel parking along the blacksmith shop, was that ever considered to be angled there? Could you fit it any more? It just seems like a very wide travel lane that's indicated on the drawing on page 2 of 3 and up towards the back of our package. And the numbers are so small I can't read them anyway, but it appears to be at least double, if not triple, of the laneway on the angled one. So I'm just curious if that's a possibility. It would be nice to get some more, because I think by the time we end up giving up that upper left stall and perhaps a stall for the container that's used to store goods for the society located there, and some other considerations, we're not really gaining much here for.
If I can speak to the question about, just for clarification, if we were to keep the 90-degree layout for the north column or rows and also implement angle parking along the north of the building, is that
I'm just curious if that was a possibility.
Right, yeah. Based on the clearance that a 45-degree would require, you need a 4-meter, you need 5.5 meters for the depth of that stall, plus 4 meters for travel lane to access. And so it's not feasible with a 90-degree. And so that's one of the reasons we stacked in that herringbone pattern, the 45-degree, the dedicated 45-degree option.
Very good. That just wasn't shown on here and the reasons why. So thank you for looking into that.
And I'm sorry for the small print.
Not a problem. Does anyone have anything else? CEO Gowdy.
Yeah, so there was a question about spot one that you had, and I believe that actually already is in place, the planter. And so I'm aware of that issue. It's just an oversight on here that it wasn't shown.
Very good.
The city does have an active transportation plan underway in partnership with the Downtown Area Redevelopment Committee, or Plan Committee. And so it is looking at a wider spread deployment of accessible options for bikes, pedestrian accommodation, and making sure we establish some accessible use transportation standards. So what are the minimum widths? Right now, we don't have that in our downtown of what clearance would be between signs and trees and that sort of thing. And so that is underway. It's actually been underway for a couple of years, I think, but is moving ahead now in partnership with DARP, and I expect that'll be here in 2023. Is that correct? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gullickson,
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll make the motion then that council direct administration to pursue a joint access agreement with the owner of 5034 49th Street to provide access to the public parking lot at 5026 49th Street.
Councillor Hibbs. Turn your mic off then. Very good. So we're all clear on the motion, and it is coming up in your machines whenever you are free to vote now, please. And that is unanimous. Thank you. So on to item 6.2. Oh, there's another one. Nobody's going to make one. Oh, there's Councillor Hibbs.
So just for clarification, it's all three of these motions that are needed to proceed. Okay. That I would move that council direct administration to consult businesses, landowners, and the general public on the reconfiguration of the public parking lot at 5026 49th Street as proposed.
Any other comments? Councillor Connick?
Too late here. I was gonna say, and throw in and consult with DARP as well, but that's fine.
Councillor Hibbs?
I would say that I meant to say DARP.
And you are free to vote. That is unanimous as well. Have consideration for an additional motion. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. That council directs administration to consult businesses, landowners, DARP, and the general public on the reconfiguration of public parking at 49B Avenue as proposed, and as proposed is option 1, correct? Thank you.
And that is up on your units as well. Please vote now. That is unanimous as well. Everybody wants more parking. All right, I think that concludes item 6.1 then. On to 6.2, offsite levies and what we heard. Engineering Manager Mitchell, whenever you are ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and members of council. Tonight, I am presenting council with feedback received during the public consultation phase of the offsite levy update. As council's Probably very aware, the city completed its updates to its major infrastructure planning documents in 2021, including the Transportation Master Plan, the Water Master Plan, the Sanitary Sewer Master Plan, and the Stormwater Master Plan. This is the part where you guys go to sleep. These documents highlighted the infrastructure projects the city needs over the next 20 years based on growth. These studies, along with the area structure plan and the outline plans previously approved by council, form the basis for the projects identified in the offsite levy update. In this update, we're also proposing some changes on how water storage and arterial road projects are attributed to the various developments. We propose to have all developers pay the same rate for these projects, regardless of where the project was located. And this resulted in a range of increases from as little as 9% up to as much as 4.5 times the previous rate. Overall, the weighted average increase was 46%. And as you can imagine, it was the properties that previously had the lowest rates that received the largest increases. For the consultation phase, administration mailed personal letters to all the impacted landowners and developers who had expressed an interest in Lacombe within the last 10 years, or who had an active interest rather in Lacombe within the last 10 years, inviting them to meet in person. And this resulted in 8 meetings. We also provided general letters notifying the public and industry of the updates to Building Industry and Land Development Alberta, the Red Deer Construction Association, the Consulting Engineers of Alberta, and the Central Alberta Realtors Association. And we asked them to forward the information on to their members. And we advertised to the general public through social media. The responses we received were varied, but in general, we categorized them into 3 themes. The first was concerns about the economy and difficult market conditions. The second was questions on the way the rates were calculated. And the third theme was in regards to the fire department response time, which, though it's not directly related to offsite levies, it is a legitimate concern, and we wanted to highlight it to council. So the first theme, concerns about the economy and difficult market conditions, definitely not surprising. Anytime rate increases are introduced, we anticipate pushback. And in this case, the rates were not increased for the last 10 years, in which time construction costs have risen significantly and new projects have emerged. In this case, developers noted that the proposed rates will increase the cost of new homes, making it hard to develop and sell new lots. They also noted that Lacombe is far enough away from large city centers and tourist draws that we need our own selling points. Historically, that's been to offer lower costs for larger homes and lots and a small town atmosphere. To be competitive, Lacombe can't compare our rates, and this is according to developers, to the municipalities close to large cities who have higher housing demands, like Red Deer, Stony Plain, Beaumont, Strathmore, Camrose, or Cochrane, many of them who are among our comparators. Though these are valid points, I will point out that administration calculated the offsite levy rates based on engineering studies that determine the infrastructure requirements to support the long-term growth over 20 years driven by new developments. These are actual costs attributed to growth. However, based on some of the other points made during consultation, administration is amending the proposed rates. The changes we're proposing will lower the rates between $18,000 and $40,000 per hectare. This results in the average increased rate dropping from 46% or $115,000 per hectare to under 20% or $95,500 per hectare. Developers also expressed an interest about the timing of the rate increases. They noted that with the recent interest rate hikes, this will slow or stop developments altogether, and the market just can't absorb any additional costs right now. In response to this comment, administration will present council with several phase-in options for the new offsite levy rates to soften the immediate burden on developers. We're also seeking council's input on development incentive concepts, including lower offsite levy rates or potential tax rate incentive options, which we'll bring to the March 20, 2023 committee meeting. The second theme was centered on how the rates were calculated. One developer noted that he felt that a 20-year horizon was too long in that it includes projects that are too far into the future, which are subject to change or delays in construction. The developer noted that based on the current plan, Lacombe will see new home buyers paying for infrastructure that may not be built for several decades, and that this would decrease housing affordability in the city. This developer was lobbying for a 10-year horizon. While the Municipal Government Act does not specify a time frame for offsite levies, development in small communities must take a long-term approach to account for many different development scenarios. This approach is reflected in our comparators horizons, which range anywhere from 20 years to 40 or more years. While it is possible that some projects may get deferred, it is equally possible that others will be moved forward. In our opinion, the project costs are more likely to be underestimated than overestimated, meaning the rates today are more likely to be too low than too high. Developers also noted that just because a project like a new reservoir is triggered by new development, it still provides benefits to the existing community, such as better pressure and increased water security. Therefore, some of the costs for water storage and pumping must be attributed to existing taxpayers. Administration reviewed the legal precedent and case law, and we can confirm that the city cannot attribute 100% of the project costs of new development if existing taxpayers also benefit. Moving forward, we will calculate the cost for reservoirs the same way as arterial roads and new facilities. This change will result in a reduction of 13,000 to 16,000 per hectare for the new benefiting areas, or for all benefiting areas. Developers also requested that the cost sharing calculations between existing taxpayers and new development be based on either area or population calculations. Administration agrees that we should calculate the costs for shared infrastructure using a transferable, defensible, and repeatable method. Area or population based calculations look at the ratio of existing development to future development that benefits from an infrastructure project. The proposed update initially attributed 50% of the cost for arterial roads and facilities to new development, but it will be modified to reflect an area or population-based methodology. Similarly, reservoirs were originally attributed at 100% to new development, and they will use that same methodology. Administration is currently looking at the options. This change will reduce the developer's portion of costs from 50% down to between 30 and 40%. Depending on which method we select. Finally, one of the developers noted that if developers are required to contribute to a new fire hall, it should provide a 10-minute response time. According to the Alberta Building Code, a response time under 10 minutes allows for smaller housing setbacks and therefore more cost-effective lots. Though this is not strictly related to the offsite levy update, it is a valid concern that we promise to bring to your attention. At its next annual strategic planning review meeting, administration will ask council to consider adding a new strategic item to develop options to address this issue. So based on the feedback received, administration has updated the rate calculations, modified the benefiting areas, and we're working with Stantec to update the report and figures. We're also developing a 3-year phase-in strategy, which will be presented as an option at the March 23 committee meeting. At a high level, developers can expect to see their rate reduced between $18,000 and $40,000 per hectare. Table 2 summarizes the rate changes between the current offsite levy rates adopted in 2013, the original proposed rates, which we used during public consultation, and the revised rates based on the feedback received. And that is my report. I will answer any questions at this time.
Well, I'll start with reading the motion that council directs administration to add offsite levies to the March 20th, 2023 committee meeting agenda. So I'll make the motion. No, terrific work so far. I look forward to talking more about it at that time because I had quite a bit of feedback in the industry that I'm in, of course, and none of it's good. But anyways, so yeah, I won't delve too much into it now, but I like how you guys have taken some of the feedback and amended some things. So that's terrific. I think we're getting there. Yeah, we have to be mindful of how this will impact a number of things. So we have to make sure we're on the before we finally decide on it that we've got the model that we think will work. But I think we're on the right track. Thank you.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, your closing statement was they'll see their rates reduced. Correct. Maybe I'm reading it incorrectly, but does it mean their rates will be reduced from what you were proposing, but not in reality, not what they had? Is that correct?
That's correct. The rate increase will be reduced.
Okay, okay, just
Thank you
so
for the
that we are
clarification.
clear with
Yes.
this. Okay, thank you so much.
So I don't think there's any surprises here from the Lake community to push back. No one likes higher rates to pay, especially when they're this massive per lot. That's easy to understand. However, I hope they appreciate the fact that they were consulted first and there's been some substantial adjustments made in what's even going to come forward in March. So great job. We all wish that these costs could be less, but there's only one place that they can be paid from, and that's our existing tax base and the future lots that are being considered here. And the simple fact of the matter is there needs to be a balance. And I think we're going about the process the way the final number is not going to please anybody ever. But as long as we can get the formula right and make it palatable, I think that we've done as good a job as can be expected with a very difficult project. So I'm not seeing a lot of other lights here, so I think that motion is up on your units now, so please feel free to vote. And that is unanimous. In favor, thank you. Appreciate it, Manager Mitchell. Keep on flipping my agenda back and forth, thinking I'm missing something. But I believe the next item that we have is for in camera, so I'll do the meetings, future meetings, upcoming meetings right now. And they're all for regular council meetings here at 5:30 at City Hall. Starting with Monday, February the 13th, followed by Monday, February the 27th, and then Monday, March 13th. And I think that does bring us to the in-camera portion. Councillor Hoekstrom?
I make a motion that we move in camera.
Prior to that, have we missed an item, Councillor Ross? Right, so before motion to move in camera at 6:11, and have that up in your units, so please go ahead and vote. I expect that'll be unanimously in favor. Very good. Thank you. Is there anyone who would like a short break or